Welcome to the deep dive. If you felt the pinch trying to rent an apartment recently, well, this deep dive is definitely for you. We're digging into the latest 2025 data, looking at this really jarring global explosion in residential rents.
Yeah.
And we're not just, listing prices. We're trying to understand the forces that our source materials suggest are, well, fundamentally changing the whole urban landscape.
Exactly. And our sources are pretty clear on this. We're kind of past a simple market cycle now.
Okay.
We're really looking at how things like housing scarcity, record prices, and crucially, this unprecedented mobility of the workforce are all combining. They're actively changing the rules of the game for city real estate.
Changing the rules of the game, and the outcome seems pretty stark, doesn't it? For most people, living in a city is quickly shifting from maybe an aspiration to, frankly, a luxury item.
That's the hard truth the numbers show us. Rents have just shot up, vertiginously over the last 5 years. And it's sparking real social tension. Protests. You see it quite visibly in parts of Europe especially. So I think our first step should be to pull apart those three key universal drivers the sources point to, the sort of trifecta of pressure before we dive into specific cities.
Okay, sounds good. Let's unpack those main ingredients causing this sustained growth everywhere.
Looking at the data, yeah, it feels like supply and demand, but what are those three specific pressure points making this situation, unique? Well, the foundation really is the general cost structure. So first, you've just got persistently high housing prices, record highs globally.
Right.
When buying a home gets that unaffordable, it just pushes huge demand onto the rental market. Simple as that.
Yeah.
And that means upward pressure on rents.
Okay, that's the downstream effect. But what about supply? Why aren't cities just, building more to meet all that demand?
Well, that brings us straight to the second big pressure point, the scarcity of new buildings. And this isn't just about red tape, though. That's part of it. It's really economic math. You've got super high costs for land, complex regulations, soaring material costs. It all dramatically slows down new construction.
Yeah.
And maybe more importantly, when building gets this expensive, developers often find that only, say, luxury units actually pencil out financially.
Right. Makes sense.
So the new supply that does come online tends to serve the high-end market, leaving the middle and the entry level completely starved for options.
So scarcity isn't just about things being slow. It's about the type of housing getting built. Okay, that definitely locks up supply for most renters. I get those first two. But the third one, worker mobility, that feels a bit counterintuitive. Wouldn't remote workers leaving big cities ease the pressure there?
You'd think so. Theoretically, yes. But the sources highlight that this third pressure, the mobility of remote workers, it's actually pretty complex. While, yeah, some mega cities might see a bit of a cooling effect briefly, overall, these remote workers are actually injecting new demand into other places, alternative markets, secondary cities, places that were maybe less competitive before. So instead of easing the pressure overall, it's kind of globalizing the competition for housing. It's creating new hotspots and just making the whole global picture more complicated, more volatile. It's this weird decentralization effect that's, ironically, making the whole system maybe less stable.
Okay, that connects the dots. It's spreading the problem, in a way.
You could say that. Yeah.
All right. Now that we understand the mechanisms, let's look at the battlefield, maybe, starting in North America.
Sounds good.
Here, we find the top three most expensive cities in the U.S., New York, Boston, and San Francisco. But what's really fascinating, according to the data, is how differently their markets have performed from 2020 to 2025.
Yeah, it's quite the contrast. We start with New York City, still at the peak. A one-bedroom in the center, a staggering 4,143 trials per month. On average, it's still the gold standard for high rents.
Wow. But given everything that happened during the pandemic, the talk of people leaving, the city being over, did that actually dent its long-term rent growth?
Well, the sources confirmed the growth was pretty sustained. New York still clocked a robust 20% increase in rents over those 5 years.
22%. Okay.
Yeah. Despite those early fears, it's, unique, mixed financial center, incredible culture, global hub for law, media. It creates this magnetic pull. People might have left for a bit, but the gravity of New York's economy just pulled demand right back in. It keeps its rank because there's this almost endless pool of tenants willing to pay those record figures just for access.
Access is key. Okay, and what about Boston, number 2 on the list?
Boston's right behind, at $3,394 a month. Okay. For Boston, the sources really point to a classic stubborn supply problem.
Ah.
You've got high land costs, pretty strict zoning, and again, those high material costs. It just squeezed the available supply down to a critical level. Boston's growth seems purely a function of people needing homes where there just isn't enough new inventory coming online, especially for the middle class.
Right, a straightforward bottleneck. Now let's get to the real curveball in the data. San Francisco. It's still number 3 most expensive, $3,332 a month, so, hardly cheap. But its growth rate is tiny compared to the others.
Yeah, this is the standout case study for worker mobility acting as a kind of brake.
Right.
SF rents were historically just unstoppable, right?
Right.
But over this entire 5-year period, just a 1% increase.
1%? Wow.
I know. The sources directly attribute this sort of shock absorber effect to the huge exit of tech workers and just the lasting impact of widespread remote work there.
Okay, but why did this happen so dramatically in SF and seemingly not nearly as much in New York? They're both huge global economic centers.
That's the critical difference the analysis points to. Tech work, especially things like coding, design, it's uniquely portable geographically. You don't physically need to be in Silicon Valley to do a lot of that work. Whereas in New York, you have that density of finance, law, high-end corporate services. Often, that still requires physical proximity, face-to-face networking, maybe regulatory presence that just anchors people there more firmly. SF's dominant industry was simply more susceptible to that mobility shift, and the market just reacted with this really abrupt cooling.
It's a fascinating lesson in how the type of industry really shapes a city's market vulnerability. Okay, so if remote work acted as a brake in SF, let's shift focus now to markets where mobility and maybe investment demand acted more like an accelerator. We're heading east, right? Where speed, not just cost, is the big story.
Exactly. And this is where the speed of the rent increases is genuinely shocking. Singapore leads the world here in growth velocity. This surprised quite a few analysts, actually. It's the quickest jump listed anywhere.
A 55% growth rate in 5 years. That's just unbelievable for a major global hub. The average rent there is now $3,167 a month, almost catching up to the most expensive U.S. cities.
It's an incredible number. And it seems to be a function of just pure structural limits hitting hyper-demand.
How so?
Well, Singapore is a densely populated island nation, right? Limited physical space is just a constant baked-in constraint.
Okay.
Then you layer on its status as this highly desirable global financial center, attracting huge international investment, lots of expats.
Right.
You get this explosive growth where the housing stock just physically cannot keep up fast enough.
Makes sense when you put it like that. And right behind Singapore in terms of speed is Dubai, which confirms its position as the leader in the Middle East rental market.
Yes. Dubai saw an almost identical jump, a massive 54% rise in 5 years. That brings average rents there to $2,401 per month.
It's still climbing fast.
Definitely. And this spike seems directly tied to the region's economic boom, these accelerated diversification plans, and the resulting surge in interest from expats across all income levels, really. Dubai is actively trying to attract global talent and capital, and the rental market is often the first place you see that economic success reflected.
Okay, we've seen the price leaders in the U.S., the velocity leaders over in Asia. Now let's turn to Europe, the old continent. The sources suggest rising rents. There aren't just an economic headache. They're actually fueling political and social tensions.
Yeah, Europe seems to present this pretty uniform picture of a crisis, and it's politically charged because it's rooted in that deep structural housing shortage we talked about earlier.
Right.
London, a mature global financial center, remains one of the toughest markets anywhere. Rents are nudging $3,000 a month now.
Wow.
And that's after increasing by a really severe 39% just since 2020.
39% in a mature market like London. I mean, that must be making the city center just completely unaffordable for younger people, key workers.
Absolutely. It's a huge issue. And you see that same basic pattern repeating across other major European capitals.
Like where?
Well, Zurich, Amsterdam, Dublin. They round out the European list in the sources, all with average rents consistently over $2,300. And the sources emphasize that in these cities, things like fragmented city planning, restrictive zoning laws, maybe a shortage of available land for quick development, they all make that general scarcity problem even worse.
Okay.
So the result is housing affordability isn't just seen as a market failure anymore. It's become a political flashpoint, directly leading to social instability, protests, It's a really tense situation.
Okay, so pulling all this global data together, then you've got New York's sort of stubborn demand, San Francisco's unique cooling off, Singapore's incredible speed, and Europe's widespread politically charged crisis. What's the main takeaway here for someone trying to understand this landscape in 2025?
I think the overall conclusion is pretty unambiguous, really. Renting a home in any city that really symbolizes globalization, whether that's for finance, culture, tech, whatever, has decisively shifted into being a luxury product.
Yeah. A luxury product.
Yeah, the combination, that structural mix of extreme scarcity of housing and the, ever-growing mobile attractiveness of these global hubs, it just makes genuinely accessible housing increasingly out of reach for ordinary citizens.
And crucially, the source material doesn't offer much hope for a quick turnaround, does it? It suggests these pressures are persistent and things aren't looking likely to improve much in the short term.
That's right.
Yeah.
The supply side just cannot react quickly enough, it seems, to counter this relentless global demand.
Which leaves us with a really provocative final question as we wrap up this deep dive. If the sources are highlighting that worker mobility, the rise of remote work was strong enough to act as a real brake on the market in a huge tech hub like San Francisco, why hasn't that same global mobility provided any significant relief, apparently, to other major centers like New York or London?
Yeah, that's the key question, isn't it?
What does that sustained pressure, that lack of short-term improvement, imply for those kinds of cities?
Well, it strongly implies, I think, that the structural scarcity driven by land costs, regulations, material inflation might just be far deeper, far more resistant to change in those older legacy global cities. Maybe more so than the disruption caused by some workers relocating. It really forces us to ask, is the supply problem just so fundamentally baked into the fabric of these older, denser cities that even a revolutionary shift in where people work can't actually fix it on its own?
Right.
It suggests that the future of urban affordability might hinge less on where people work and maybe more on finding the political will to actually tackle the physical constraints, the challenges of construction, density, and planning. That seems to be the central challenge that's going to define city life moving forward.